Good day everyone, I am just Tagabunlang and today I will be presenting my assigned topic about administration of Aquino under Chapter 9, The Struggles for Progress. The content for this presentation is all about Corazon Cojuangco Aquino biography, political, economic, and social achievements, landmark legislations, challenges of the Aquino administration, and the Aquino's end of presidency. Who is Corazon Aquino? In her full name, Maria Corazon Sumulong Cojuangco Aquino, popularly known as President Corazon or President Cory Aquino, was a Filipino politician who served as the 11th President of the Philippines from 1986 to 1992. She was known as the first female president in the Philippines and in Asia. She was born on January 25, 1933 in Paniqui, Tarlac Province, Philippines. She died on August 1, 2009 at the age of 76 in Makati. She is the wife and the widow of the late Benigno Aquino Jr. The presidency of Corazon Aquino began following the triumph of the peaceful People Power Revolution and became symbolic of the Filipino people's desire for change following nearly 2 decades of authoritarian rule. Aquino immediately undid many of the measures instituted by Marcos, including returning an independent court system, repealing repressive labor laws, releasing political prisoners, and the creation of a commission to investigate human rights abuses under Marcos. Let's move on to landmark legislation. Aquino promulgated 2 landmark legal codes, namely the Family Code of 1987, which reformed the civil law on family relations, and the Administrative Code of 1987, which reorganized the structure of the executive branch of government. Another landmark law that was enacted during her tenure was the 1991 Local Government Code, which devolved national government powers to local government units or LGUs. The new code also enhanced the power of LGUs to enact local taxation measures and assured them of a share in the national revenue. Political achievements. The 1987 Constitution, approved and enacted in February 1987, crippled presidential power to declare martial law and proposed the creation of autonomous regions in the Cordilleras and Muslim Mindanao, restoration of the presidential form of government and the bicameral Congress, contain articles which include the rights of the people, and created to replace the 1973 Constitution. Restoration of democratic institutions. Freedom Constitution or the Proclamation No. 3 provided for the carryover of some of the provisions of the 1973 Constitution not contrary to the ideals of democracy, provided the abolition of Batasang Pambansa and the reorganization of the government, gave the President the right to issue executive orders which would serve as laws while there was no Congress. National reconciliation. To maintain peace and order in the country, President Aquino announced a policy of national reconciliation, asking for the cooperation of the Filipinos, especially the rebel groups. ARMM or Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. Mindanao was a very independent part of the Philippines who refused to be part of the Philippines. To solve this problem, President Cory gave them a freedom to be singled out from the country and declared it as ARMM. PCGR or the Presidential Commission on Government Reorganization. Its main function was to streamline bureaucracy. In the process, some government offices were phased out, displacing a number of government employees. Economic achievements. The Aquino government believed that a large portion of the nation's wealth was taken by the Marcoses, and so the PCGG or the Presidential Commission on Good Government was created. The CARL or the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Law was signed by President Aquino, which implemented the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program or the CARP. The Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program or the CARP was a land reform law signed by President Corazon Aquino on June 10, 1988. It aims for a more equitable distribution and ownership of the land. It meant to distribute lands to farmers in a span of 10 years, but was extended by the 11th Congress due to delays in land distribution and lack of budget allocation. Agrarian reform is very significant for the economy of any country because more than half of the population is employed in the agricultural sector. Agriculture is the main source of livelihood, especially for the developing countries. Reforms are important because they protect the rights of the farmers. Social achievements, DSWD, or the Department of Social Welfare and Development, that was formerly called DSSD or MSSD. Protection and rehabilitation of the mentally and physically disabled, provide complete services for the needy, and improve inhuman conditions. Generics Law. The Generics Law of 1988 was hailed as a landmark law that could benefit the public, but it has failed miserably due to weak support from doctors, strong lobbying of multinational drug companies, and the health department's incompetence. The challenges in Cory Aquino's administration. Despite the mood of national euphoria that accompanied Corazon Aquino's assumption of the presidency, the problems that her government faced were extremely difficult ones, involving both political and economic reconstruction. Political reconstruction. Political issues and events dominated President Aquino's first 2 years in power. The new government moved immediately to dismantle the political structures that Marcos left behind. Aquino dissolved the Marcos-controlled legislature. She dismissed thousands of local governors and mayors, replacing them with officers in charge who would serve until elections could be held. The new government moved quickly to recapture the assets that Marcos and his cronies had accumulated during the previous administration. Aquino's first executive order established the Presidential Commission on Good Government to pursue legal actions against Marcos and his associates outside the Philippines and to identify and sequester their assets in the Philippines. The need to provide a legal framework for the new government and to begin to rebuild the institutions. In March 1986, Aquino declared a Freedom Constitution that gave her the decree-making powers of her predecessor, although for a limited period included a Bill of Rights and called for a convention to draft a new constitution. The Constitution provided for a legislature similar to U.S. Congress. Congressional elections were held in May 1987. The partnership between the military and the Aquino government. The partnership between the military and the Aquino government remains uneasy, and the military itself is highly factionalized. The Aquino government moved to satisfy some of the demands of the military after the August coup attempt, adopting a firmer stance toward the communist insurgency, increasing military pay, and removing from the cabinet members of whom the military had been especially critical. Aquino was also forced to co-opt to military leadership, appointing and promoting on the basis of loyalty to the new government, and this has increased resentment in some quarters and set back the process of professionalizing the armed forces. External debt inherited from previous administration. When Corazon Aquino became president, she inherited an economy that was bankrupt and debt-ridden as a result of 20 years of misrule and mismanagement under the Marcos regime. As president, Aquino focused on revitalizing and rejuvenating the sagging economy. At the end of 1985, the total external debt of the Philippines was $26.3 billion. Although the total had only increased by 6% in the previous 3 years, the ratio of Philippine external debt to GNP had jumped from 63 to 82%, the result of declining economic activity and the real depreciation of the peso. By the end of 1986, the debt and GNP ratio had risen to 94%, placing the Philippines among the most heavily indebted, less developed countries. The three types of economic policy problems Aquino administration. First, short-run economic policy to achieve recovery after almost 3 years of recession. The establishment of broad outlines of economic policy for longer-term growth. The renegotiation of the Philippines' external debt with official and private creditors. The Philippine stabilization episode was unusual in that domestic consumption expenditure did not drop, but instead continued to slowly rise as households drew down their savings. By 1986, there was a little reserve left to consumption that could be drawn on to support recovery. Investment had been decimated during the recession and dropped further in 1986, a reflection of both the high degree of political and economic uncertainty and large excess capacity in most industries. The government immediately drew up a plan of increased public expenditure to boost the economy, primarily through a community employment and the development program for labor-intensive projects in rural areas. The Aquino administration had much greater success in implementing broad economic policy reforms, although these took place under the shadow of political events, and not all reforms were achieved. By mid-1988, the policy environment in the Philippines had been fundamentally altered. Economic policy was more neutral in rewarding lines of economic activity, more transparent than it had been since the 1950s, and compared favorably with that of any other East Asian country. As the end of her presidency drew near, close advisors told Aquino that since she was not inaugurated under the 1987 Constitution, she was still eligible to seek the presidency again. President Aquino strongly declined the request for her to seek re-election and wanted to set example to both citizens and politicians that the presidency is not a lifetime position. In contrast with previous administration or inaugurations, Aquino attended the swearing-in of her successor at the Arena Grandstand in Manila. As final gesture as president, she rode the presidential limousine to the event and later left the venue aboard a Toyota sedan, a gift from her siblings, which was a strong symbol of her return to private life as citizen Cory. And that's all for my presentation. Thank you for watching and listening.